Uncertainty is a funny thing. As humans, we tend to dislike uncertainty, but if we accept it and, in fact, even embrace it, it can actually be kind of a superpower. This is one of the most crucial things we learn when training to be scientists, and yet this is one of the things I never quite know the best way to explain. But the basic thought is this. The culture of science has helped us develop a new way of talking to each other about uncertainty. Perhaps the best way to describe it is that for any factual claim you make, you state it tentatively. You never say you're completely sure. It might sound a bit odd, but that tentativeness is actually a huge strength of science. The idea of stating how uncertain you are is a lot of what makes it possible for scientists to do what we do. And I think the strength is something that can be carried into many other areas in which we have to talk about facts and make decisions. So, how does this work? Well, what I'm trying to capture here is that in scientific culture, when we say a fact, we also say how strongly we believe that fact is true. So instead of saying, I'm really, really sure about this, you'd say, you have confidence at the 99.99999% level. That's essentially saying, I would bet my life on this being true. Of course, there's always a small possibility of being wrong, and it is the ability to step back from making an absolute statement that's really important here. Of course, for most things, we can't be nearly that certain. For something you're mostly sure about, you could say you're 80% confident. That would mean you think you have a 4 in 5 chance of being right. That's pretty good. Or you might say to yourself, I'm not very sure about this statement, but I'm leaning slightly in one direction, so I'll say I'm 52% confident. If you say you have less than 50% confidence, that would mean you actually think something is likely to be false. Of course, this style has both advantages and disadvantages, so let me describe some of each. The advantage is, of course, that it makes you feel much more flexible, much more able to entertain possibilities that are different from what you expected. I think one of the reasons that scientists ended up speaking this way is because our understanding of the world is always changing and always should be updating. Otherwise, it's too easy to fall in love with an idea, and using confidence levels is one way to remind yourself to not get too attached to any belief. It helps you stay open to new information in the event that the world does something different than you expected. There's also an aspect of this which I think has to do with saving face. You don't want to go all in on some statement, and then 5 years later, there's a new development in your field. Then suddenly, that statement you made before seems embarrassing. As a scientist, you want to be able to separate yourself a little bit from the statements you make on the job. You want to go on to your next project and not be identified as that person who made a claim that was wrong. Instead, other scientists would recognize that when you said that something was 90% likely, that means there's a 1 in 10 chance of being wrong. They just calculate that this was your 1 time in 10 to be wrong. Then you could still feel good about your work and have the respect of your colleagues because you were honest about the chance of being incorrect. The thing about stating your findings with a confidence level is that you are investing your ego in being good at estimating how likely you are to be right or wrong, instead of investing your ego in having the right answer every time. In this way, stating a confidence level is strikingly useful because it helps us manage that deeply human desire to save face. In fact, I was talking to a colleague and he told me about a study that he thought was relevant in a funny way. It was a study of 2-year-olds who were learning to talk. The researchers were surprised to find that even 2-year-olds were already telling lies, and one of the biggest motivations for lying was to save face. One 2-year-old in the study was asked, "Where's Daddy?" and replied, "Oh, Daddy's upstairs." And then the father walks in from the back porch and the 2-year-old says, "I mean the other Daddy." In this case, there wasn't any other Daddy. I found this quite strange. What is a 2-year-old trying to save face over? It's not like we really hold our 2-year-olds to a high standard of credibility. But it seems there is a powerful human drive to always appear right. This is why confidence levels are such a big deal. They help us get around this deep human tendency. They are a way of speaking where we can make claims about the world but still be open to new information. We've talked a bit about the advantages of using confidence levels, but of course, we should also talk a bit about the downsides of this way of thinking. So think about this. Would you rather vote for a political candidate who says, "I guarantee that my plan will create jobs," or the candidate who says, "I'm 75% sure that my plan will create jobs"? The first one might make us feel safer. You'd probably feel a little better if someone gave you a plan that was guaranteed to work. But at the same time, you might also say to yourself, why can't these candidates just admit that their plans could fail? For me, the choice would be obvious. I would feel much better about a leader who said, look, I've considered all the options. This is the one with the best chance of success. Even if it's only 70% likely to succeed, we've got to try something, and this is our best shot. I do think there's another psychological element to this. Most of us remember when we, as children, had adults around who always knew the answers, and they always knew what to do. They had a solution for any policy problem that you as a kid cared about. I mean, it probably wasn't job creation, but for most problems, adults could just magically make things work. On some level, we all still have a desire for that level of certainty, and that child within each of us is looking for it in our political leaders. I'm guessing that this is still in play when we vote. But that's not the only issue. At least in the United States, we like it when people sound confident and know what should be done. Somehow that resonates well in our particular culture. But the culture of science is different in this respect. If you go to a talk, you don't really want to hear the person present their theory as the only thing that could be true. Scientific communities are at least a little less focused on how confident people sound and more interested in considering all the possibilities. The good news is that confidence levels aren't just something scientists use. This is something we can all do in our daily lives and get the same benefits. You can try out thinking this way whenever you want. All you have to do is state a confidence level every time you make a factual statement. You could even force everybody at the dinner table for the next couple of nights to give confidence levels for all their statements and see what happens. Or if that seems like it might result in eating alone, you could try this out just as a game with friends and see whether the feel of the conversation is different. Maybe people will become less interested in saving face, or more inclined to think about what would happen if some of their beliefs turned out to be wrong. There's another metaphor that has been floating around in my mind to explain why this is so important, and that's skiing. If you're trying to ski down the hill, you're not going to lock your knees and stand rigid. That doesn't work. You wouldn't get very far. Instead, you bend your knees, you move your weight from one foot to the other, and you react to the bumps and wiggles of the terrain as you go. And that, I think, is much more how a scientist tries to understand reality. Our picture of reality is constantly being updated along the way, so you want to tentatively place your weight on different beliefs. Sometimes you'll lean 90% on this belief and 70% on that one. Of course, in this skiing metaphor, you'd need lots of legs, like a centipede or an octopus, because there's so many facts about the world. This approach is what you might call dynamic stability, because you keep your balance by adjusting to new information. I worry that people are accustomed to skiing through life standing rigid with locked knees, because there's still this perception that being less than 100% certain is wishy-washy. That's why I wanted us all to begin thinking together about this other way of making statements that also communicates our degree of uncertainty or certainty, be it a very tentative 52%, or a bet your life 99.9999%. I think this gives us the strength to flexibly respond to new information. And in this way, we can ski the fascinating and quirky terrain of the world we actually live in.